Get out. Find somewhere else to die." Those were the words my father said to me, standing in the hallway of a house that used to belong to my mother. She had been buried 6 days earlier. He had already changed the locks. The woman beside him, the one he swore he barely knew, was already picking out curtains for the room where my parents used to sleep. He told everyone in the family that I had no claim to anything. He told the insurance company he was the only person left to collect. He wanted me to believe that my mother could no longer speak for me, that with her gone, there was nobody left standing between us. In one way, he was right. She wasn't there anymore to argue with him, to step in front of me the way she always had. But my father made one mistake. He assumed that because my mother couldn't talk, she had nothing left to say. He had no idea that 3 years before she ever got sick, she had already answered every question he was about to ask. She had already made every decision he thought was his to make. On the day the whole family sat around one table to hear her final wishes read out loud, my father would learn that the woman he'd been so quick to erase had spent years quietly protecting me, from a chair in a lawyer's office he never even knew existed. What he said to me in that hallway was cruel enough on its own. But it wasn't the worst thing that happened that week. Not even close. Because while he was busy measuring me for a life with no home, my mother's plan was already moving, a plan she'd set in place long before either of us knew we would ever need it. I was sick. I was scared. And for a while, I believed him when he told me I had nothing left. I was wrong. So was he. What came next changed everything he thought he understood about the woman he married and about the daughter he tried to throw away. Watching from where? Please comment. My name is Corinne Hale. I'm 28 years old, and I have lupus. Before I go any further, if this story genuinely moves you, feel free to like and subscribe. And if you have a moment, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now let me take you back to last October, the night my mother's heart stopped, and the day everything in my life changed. The hospital room smelled like hand sanitizer and flowers that were starting to die. Someone had left a vase of carnations on the windowsill 3 days earlier, and no one had thought to throw them out. I was holding my mother's hand. It felt so thin I could trace every bone underneath the skin. Helen Grace Whitfield, the woman who had built an entire financial consulting career starting from a studio apartment and a library card, weighed 91 pounds by then. Pancreatic cancer had taken the rest of her. The doctors had given her 14 months, and she used every single one of them. Her eyes opened, just barely. For one moment she looked at me, and she was fully herself again, sharp, clear, present. "The house is yours, baby," she whispered. "Don't let anyone tell you different." I squeezed her hand. I thought it was the morphine talking. I thought she was confused, saying things that wouldn't mean anything by morning. Then she closed her eyes. The monitor beeped, and then it didn't. I sat there for 11 minutes before a nurse walked in. I know because I counted every second. My father arrived 2 hours later. Sylvia was with him, his new wife, though he insisted she wasn't new, that they'd only been together a few months. She was carrying a designer handbag I'd never seen before. Her eyes were dry, perfectly dry. Harold Bragg stood at the foot of my mother's empty bed and said, "At least she's not suffering anymore." He never once looked at me. My hands were swollen that night. My knees were locked. I was in the middle of a lupus flare so severe I'd been using a wheelchair for the past week, and I couldn't even stand without gripping the bed rail. The one person who had always made sure I could stand it all was gone. She had told me the house was mine. I didn't understand it then. I understand it now. 83 people came to my mother's funeral. I know because Aunt Carol counted them. Helen Whitfield was the kind of woman people remembered. She ran free tax workshops at the community center every spring. She brought soup to every new mother on our street. She once spent an entire Saturday helping a neighbor understand his mortgage paperwork so he wouldn't lose his home. 83 people showed up for her, and my father stood at the podium and talked about himself. "I lost my partner," he said, gripping the edges of the lectern. "My rock, my anchor." He spoke for 6 minutes. He mentioned my mother's name 4 times. He mentioned his own grief 9 times. I was counting. Sylvia sat in the front row in a black dress, a new gold bracelet catching the light every time she moved. She cried exactly when someone was watching her and stopped the moment they looked away. I saw her do it 3 times. I sat in my wheelchair near the side aisle, not the front row. Nobody had saved me a seat there. Aunt Carol, my mother's older sister, sat beside me and held my hand the way Mom used to, firm, warm, like she was keeping me from floating off somewhere. "Something isn't right with that woman," Carol whispered, watching Sylvia dab at dry eyes with a folded tissue. After the service, people lined up to hug my father. Sylvia accepted condolences the way someone hosts a party. Gracious nods, soft thank yous, a hand resting on every arm. I was wheeling myself toward the parking lot when I saw her step behind the chapel, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was low, but I caught every word. "It's done. We can start Monday." She hung up, turned, saw me watching, and smiled. "You should rest, sweetheart," she said. "You look exhausted." 3 days after the funeral, the house still smelled like the lilies people had sent, wilting petals covering every surface. My father called me into the living room. He sat in my mother's armchair, the green velvet one she'd owned since before I was born. Sylvia perched on the armrest beside him, legs crossed, one hand resting on his shoulder. "We need to talk about the house," my father said. I was on the couch across from them, joints aching, hands stiff, barely having slept in a week. "This house," he went on, "the investment accounts, the life insurance, it all comes to me. I'm the surviving spouse. That's how the law works." Sylvia nodded along. "It's what the law says, sweetie." My father slid a piece of paper across the coffee table, a quitclaim deed with my name already typed at the bottom. All I had to do was sign. "Just make this easy," he said, "for everyone." I stared at the paper. The ink was fresh. Someone had prepared this in advance. "Mom told me the house was mine," I said. He leaned back. "She was on painkillers. That means nothing." "She said it before the painkillers." His jaw tightened. "Your mother spoiled you. You think you deserve something you didn't earn?" Sylvia rubbed his shoulder. "Honey, she's grieving. Give her a minute." I didn't touch the paper. "I already have a lawyer," my father said, his voice dropping into something calm and rehearsed. "He says your mother died without a will. No will means everything goes to me. That's the law in this state." He stood and looked down at me. "If you don't sign this by Friday, I'll have you removed." He walked out. Sylvia followed, leaving the quitclaim deed sitting perfectly centered on the table, like a place setting. Friday was 2 days away. Friday came. I didn't sign. At midnight, my bedroom door swung open. No knock, no warning, just the click of the handle and hallway light cutting across my bed. My father stood in the doorway holding an empty suitcase. He tossed it onto my blanket. "Pack your things." I sat up, my shoulders screaming, the flare getting worse, joints hot and swollen, every movement like grinding glass. "This is Mom's house," I said. "Your mother is dead, and I'm the surviving spouse. This is my house now." Behind him in the hallway, Sylvia leaned against the wall, arms folded, watching, the smallest smile on her lips. My father stepped closer, his voice low and steady, the kind of calm that only comes from having already decided something. "Find somewhere else to die. Your mother isn't here to protect you anymore." I looked at him for a long time. This was the man who drove me to my first lupus appointment when I was 16. The man who used to carry me to bed when the pain got too bad to walk. That man was gone. Or maybe he had never really been there at all, and it had always been my mother standing behind him, holding us both up. I packed what I could, clothes, medications, my mother's reading glasses off the nightstand. I dragged the suitcase across the porch where she used to sit every morning. Her wind chimes were still ringing in the cold. I called Aunt Carol at 1 a.m. She answered on the first ring. She didn't ask a single question. She just said, "I'm coming." I couldn't cry in her car. My body simply didn't have the energy left. Carol reached over and held my hand across the center console. "We're going to figure this out," she said. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a number surfaced. A phone number my mother had made me memorize years earlier. I had never once called it. I didn't even know whose number it was until that moment. Aunt Carol's guest room had yellow curtains and a quilt that smelled like cedar. I sat on the edge of the bed at 3 in the morning trying to figure out what I had left. I checked my bank account, $2,112. That was everything. I called my pharmacy the next morning. The automated system cut me off before I could even spell my last name. Your insurance has been terminated. If you'd like to pay out of pocket, the total for your current prescriptions is $1,814. 1 month of medication, nearly my entire savings. Hydroxychloroquine, prednisone, the drugs that kept my immune system from attacking my own body. Without them, the flares would worsen. The kidney damage would speed up. My doctor had been clear about that for years. My father hadn't just taken my home. He had cut off my ability to stay alive. I sat at Carol's kitchen table with a mug of tea I couldn't even drink because my hands were too swollen to hold it. She sat across from me and watched me stare at nothing. "Your mama told me something once," she said quietly. "About a year before she got sick. She grabbed my arm at Thanksgiving, right there in the kitchen while your father was watching football, and she said, 'If anything ever happens to me, tell Corinne to call Judith Marsh.'" I looked up. "Who's Judith Marsh?" Carol reached into her purse and pulled out a folded napkin, soft at the creases, a phone number written in blue ink. "I don't know," she said, "but your mama wrote this down and made me promise to keep it. She said you'd need it when things got bad." I took the napkin. The handwriting was my mother's, neat, deliberate. Even on a napkin, she never rushed. Things were bad. Things were about as bad as I thought they could get. I was wrong about that too. My father moved fast, I'll give him that. Within a week, he'd called every relative in the family, Uncle Frank, Uncle Walter, cousins I hadn't spoken to since Thanksgiving 2 years before. His version of events went like this. Corinne, still grieving, had become erratic. She refused to cooperate with the estate process. She left the house on her own. She was unwell, physically, and he implied, mentally too. "She needs help," he told Uncle Frank. "I tried. She wouldn't let me." Sylvia handled the online side of things. She posted in the family Facebook group my mother had created years earlier for sharing holiday photos and birthday wishes. "We tried to help Corinne, but she wants to do things her own way. Please pray for her." 47 reactions. Hearts, praying hands, comments like, "So sorry you're going through this," directed at my father and Sylvia, not at me. My phone rang for 3 days straight. Cousins, aunts, people I barely knew. "Your dad just lost his wife. Don't make this harder." "He's trying his best, Corinne. Maybe you should apologize." I stopped answering. Carol fielded the calls while I lay on her guest bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the inflammation crawl up my wrists like fire under the skin. One person believed me. One person out of my entire family. That night, Carol sat on the edge of my bed and handed me the napkin again. "Call that number tomorrow," she said. "First thing." I smoothed it between my swollen fingers. Judith Marsh. I didn't know her. I didn't know what she did, or what my mother had told her, or why. But my mother had planned this. She had written the number down. She had told Carol to remember it. My mother never did anything without a reason. I set my alarm for 7. I called at 7:15. No answer. Again at 7:40. Voicemail. At 8:05. Voicemail again. At 8:22, I dialed a 4th time, my thumb shaking, and not from the lupus this time. 2 rings, then a voice, low and steady, warm in the way courtroom voices sometimes are. Professional warmth, the kind that makes you trust someone before you even know why. Marsh and Crane, attorneys at law. I swallowed. "My name is Corinne Hale. My mother was Helen Whitfield." The voice on the other end changed, not louder, closer. "Helen's daughter." "Yes." A pause. 3 seconds, maybe 4. I heard a chair creak. "I've been waiting for your call." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. "Your mother came to me 3 years ago," Judith said. "She knew this would happen. She prepared for it." 3 years before the diagnosis, before the chemo, before Sylvia had ever unpacked a suitcase in our house. My mother had walked into this woman's office 3 years earlier and started getting ready for the exact moment I was living through right now. "I can't say more over the phone," Judith continued. "Can you come to my office tomorrow, 10 in the morning?" Yes, I can." "Good. Bring your ID, nothing else." I wrote down the address with a pen Carol handed me, my hand trembling on the paper. "Corinne," Judith's voice slowed. "Whatever you do, do not sign anything your father gives you. And don't tell him you called me." "I won't." "One more thing. Your mother told me you'd call when things got bad. She said I'd know, because you'd sound exactly the way you sound right now." I couldn't speak. My throat closed around something that felt like a fist. "She also told me to tell you, you're going to be okay." The line clicked. I sat on Carol's kitchen floor with the phone against my chest and just breathed. Tomorrow, 10 in the morning. Answers. A letter arrived at Carol's house the next morning, hand-delivered by courier. A cream-colored envelope, heavy paper, the kind lawyers use when they want you to feel small before you've even opened it. Preston Wade, Esquire, representing Harold Bragg. I read it standing in Carol's kitchen, still in my pajamas, my coffee going cold on the counter. The language was sharp and clean. Helen Whitfield had died intestate, without a valid will. Under state law, the surviving spouse was entitled to the entirety of the marital estate. I was hereby directed to cease any and all claims to the Burwood Lane property and associated financial accounts within 10 calendar days. There was a second paragraph, the one that made my vision blur. Their client intended to petition the court for a determination of incapacity regarding me, on the basis of my chronic medical condition, which they claimed rendered me unable to manage my own financial and legal affairs. Mentally incapacitated. My own father was trying to have me declared incompetent, not because I couldn't think clearly, but because I had lupus. Carol read the letter over my shoulder and didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she grabbed her purse and her car keys. "Get dressed," she said. "We have an appointment in 90 minutes." She drove me to the pharmacy first and paid for my medications out of her own savings, $1,814, without even flinching. She just handed over her debit card and said, "Helen would have done the same for my kids." In the car, I stared at that letter again. The word incapacity sat in the middle of the page like a bruise. My father hadn't just taken my home and my insurance. He was coming after my legal right to fight back at all. We pulled into Judith Marsh's parking lot at 9:53, 7 minutes early. I was done being late for anything. Her office sat on the second floor of a brick building downtown, a small brass nameplate by the door. No flash, no marble lobby, just quiet competence. I was sitting in her waiting room when my phone rang. My father. I almost let it go, but something in me, maybe the part that still remembered he used to be my father, picked up. "Sign the paper, Corinne." "No." "You have nothing. No money, no job, no insurance." "I have rights." "You have lupus. That's all you have." The words landed like a slap, clean and deliberate. He had practiced that line. "Mom wouldn't want this," I said. "Your mom is gone. I'm what's left. Then I'll talk to a lawyer." Silence, long enough that I could hear Sylvia whispering something in the background. "What lawyer?" he finally said. "With what money?" I hung up. My hand was shaking. I set the phone face down on the chair beside me and pressed my palms flat against my legs until they stopped. The receptionist glanced at me. She didn't say a word, just slid a glass of water across the counter. Carol was beside me. She'd heard the whole call. "What did he say?" she asked. I looked at her. "He doesn't know yet." She studied my face and nodded slowly. She understood. At exactly 10 o'clock, the inner door opened. A woman stood there, early 60s, silver-streaked hair pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose, a gray blazer over a white blouse, no jewelry except a thin watch. She had the look of someone who never raised her voice because she never needed to. "Corinne," she said, and smiled. Not the sympathetic smile people had been giving me for weeks, but a real one, warm and certain. "I'm Judith Marsh. Your mother was one of my closest friends. Come in." I spent 2 hours in Judith's office that morning. She told me things I'll share with you in a moment. But first, I need to tell you what happened while I was in that room, because Sylvia hadn't been sitting still either. My phone buzzed as I was leaving the building. Dr. Samuel Greer, my rheumatologist, the man who had treated my lupus for 6 years, never called unless something was wrong. "Corinne, I need you to know something." His voice was careful. "A woman called my office this morning, identified herself as Sylvia Bragg, said she was your stepmother and legal guardian." I stopped walking. Carol grabbed my arm. "She requested a full copy of your medical records, treatment history, psychological evaluations, medication lists, everything." "What did you tell her?" "I told her no. HIPAA doesn't allow it. She's not your guardian. She's not listed on any of your forms." He paused. "But Corinne, she was specific. She asked about your cognitive function. She asked whether your condition affects your decision-making." My stomach dropped. "They're building a case," Dr. Greer said quietly. "They want documentation that says you can't take care of yourself." I leaned against Carol's car, the October wind cutting through my coat. "Can I give you some advice?" he asked. "Not as your doctor, as someone who has watched you fight this disease for 6 years. Yes, protect yourself." I thanked him, hung up, and told Carol everything. She gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles went pale. That woman is evil. That night I sat on Carol's guest bed and wrote down everything. Every conversation, every date, every dollar, everything my mother had ever said about the house, the accounts, the future. And I remembered something else, a sentence from years earlier when Mom thought I was asleep on the couch. "Everything's in my name, baby. Not his. Mine." She had been talking to someone on the phone. I never knew who. Now I was starting to understand. Let me take you back to that morning in Judith's office, the part I skipped. The room was small but warm, bookshelves floor to ceiling, legal texts with cracked spines. On the wall behind her desk hung a framed photograph. 2 young women on a college lawn, laughing. One was Judith. The other was my mother, 20 years old, her whole life still ahead of her. Judith caught me looking at it. "Fall of '84, she said. "Your mother was the smartest person I ever met, and I went to law school." She sat down, opened a drawer, and pulled out a thick leather folder, worn at the corners. "Your mother came to me 3 years ago," she said, "right after she found text messages on your father's phone, messages from Sylvia." I felt the room tilt. 3 years ago, that was before she was even diagnosed. "Exactly," Judith said, folding her hands on the desk. "She came to me and said, 'I need to make sure Corinne is taken care of, no matter what happens to me.' She wasn't sick yet, but she was clear-eyed. She saw exactly what your father was becoming." Judith opened the folder. I could see stacked documents inside, tabbed and labeled, though she didn't show me the contents yet. "Your mother put everything in order, Corinne. The house, the accounts, everything." "What do you mean, everything?" She held up a sealed manila envelope, heavy and official, my mother's handwriting on the front. Just my name. "Your mother wrote this for you, but you'll hear it at the reading. The formal reading of her will," she leaned forward, "which I'll be scheduling within the next 2 weeks. Every relevant party will be required to attend." She let the weight of that settle. "Your mother wasn't afraid of dying, Corinne. She was afraid of what would happen to you after." I couldn't touch the envelope. I could only stare at my name in her handwriting and feel my chest crack open. Judith handed me a glass of water, and I drank half of it before I realized my hands had stopped shaking. "Here's what you need to understand," she said. "Your father's lawyer is claiming Helen died intestate, without a will. That's the entire foundation of everything he's doing. The quitclaim deed, the insurance claim, the incapacity petition. All of it rests on the idea that your mother left nothing behind." She tapped the leather folder. "He's wrong." Judith explained it piece by piece. My mother had executed a formal last will and testament 3 years earlier. It had been notarized by a retired judge, Patricia Sowell, a personal friend of Judith's. 2 independent witnesses had signed it, and my mother had recorded a video statement to accompany it, confirming her wishes in her own voice, on camera, while she was still healthy and lucid. "This will is airtight," Judith said. "No competent attorney would even try to challenge it." My mind was spinning. 3 years. My mother had spent 3 years preparing for this moment and never said a single word to me about it. She also left a handwritten letter, Judith added. She wanted everyone to hear it, everyone, at the reading. I'll send formal notice to your father, to his attorney, and to the relevant family members. They'll all be in the room. I sat with that image. My father sitting in a room, hearing my mother's words read aloud, words he never knew existed. "You don't have to fight, Corinne," Judith said, her voice softening for the first time. "Your mother already fought for you. All you have to do is show up." I cried then, quietly, not the way I'd been crying all month, not out of pain or fear or exhaustion. This was different. This was the sound of someone realizing she wasn't alone after all. Judith slid a box of tissues across the desk and didn't rush me. "There's one more thing your mother did," she said once I'd wiped my eyes. "But it's better if you hear it with everyone else in the room." 2 days later, the letters went out, certified mail, return receipt requested. My father was at the Burwood Lane house, my mother's house, on a Tuesday morning when his letter arrived. I know because Carol told me what happened next. He called her. His voice wasn't the same voice that had told me to find somewhere else to die. This one was thinner, faster, almost confused. "Who is Judith Marsh?" Helen never mentioned a lawyer. Carol kept her answer short. "Come to the reading and find out." "What reading? There is no will. My lawyer already confirmed it." "Then you have nothing to worry about, Harold." She hung up. That evening my phone rang. My father again, but the tone had shifted completely. The cold authority was gone, replaced by something I almost didn't recognize. He sounded careful. "Listen, sweetheart. Maybe we can work something out. You don't need a lawyer." Sweetheart. He hadn't called me that since I was 15. "I'll be at the reading, Dad."
"Corinne, see you there." I hung up. Carol looked at me across the kitchen table and raised her coffee mug in a silent toast. Sylvia posted on Facebook that night. No direct mention of the reading, just a Bible verse about betrayal and a caption, "When family turns on you, God sees everything." 8 heart reactions, 3 prayer emojis. I didn't respond. I didn't even open the app. I was on Carol's couch making a list Judith had asked me to prepare. Dates, events, things my mother had said. Judith called that afternoon with an update. My father had hired a second lawyer, Dennis Cole, a specialist in estate disputes. "He's panicking," Judith said, and I could hear the calm smile in her voice. "Good. 2 weeks, 14 days, until everyone would sit in the same room and my mother would speak for the last time." I took my medication. I went to bed. And for the first night in weeks, I slept without waking up once. The morning of the reading, I stood in front of Carol's bathroom mirror for a long time. I'd lost weight. The flare was still active, my fingers puffy, my wrists stiff, shadows under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. But I put on a clean blouse, a dark blazer Carol had lent me, and simple flats, because heels weren't an option. Judith had told me, "Come dressed like you belong, because you do." Carol drove. Neither of us spoke. Just the sound of tires on wet pavement and the turn signal clicking like a metronome. Marsh and Crane occupied a quiet corner office in a brick building on Whitmore Street, 2nd floor, no elevator. I took the stairs one at a time, Carol's hand under my elbow. The conference room was already set up. A long oak table, 12 chairs, water pitchers at each end, a window looking out over the street with pale October light falling across the carpet. People were already there. Uncle Frank, my mother's younger brother, gray beard, flannel shirt, hands in his pockets, nodded at me. Uncle Walter, Helen's youngest brother, sat quiet at the far end. Ruth Delgado, the family accountant, glasses on a chain around her neck, legal pad open. 2 paralegals from Judith's firm sat near the door. Then my father walked in, wearing a navy suit and a fresh haircut. Sylvia was a step behind him, black dress, modest neckline, tissue already in hand, ready to perform. Behind them came Preston Wade, thin and tall, briefcase held like a shield, and Dennis Cole, shorter and already sweating. My father sat on one side of the table. I sat on the other. We were 8 feet apart. It felt like a canyon. Then Judith walked in, carrying a leather folder in one hand and a laptop under her arm. She set both down at the head of the table. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. "Let's begin,"
Wade spoke first, buttoning his jacket as he stood like he was about to address a jury. Before we begin, my client would like to note that he was unaware of any will and questions its validity. He sat back down, 12 seconds of rehearsed delivery. Judith didn't stand. She adjusted her reading glasses and opened the folder. "Noted," she said. "The will was executed 3 years ago, notarized by Judge Patricia Sowell, and witnessed by 2 independent parties who are available to testify. Its validity is beyond question." Wade shifted in his chair. Cole wrote something on his pad. My father stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. "My wife never told me about any of this." Judith looked at him, her expression unchanged. "She wasn't required to, Mr. Bragg." A ripple moved through the room. Uncle Frank glanced at Uncle Walter. Ruth stopped writing. Sylvia leaned forward. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice cracking just enough to sound wounded. Helen was sick. She wasn't thinking clearly. Judith turned to her slowly, the way you turn to face something you've been expecting. "Mrs. Bragg, you are not a party to this will. I'll ask you to remain silent unless addressed." The room went completely still. The only sound was the clock on the wall and the soft tap of Cole's pen against his legal pad. Sylvia opened her mouth, then closed it. Her hand found my father's arm, but he didn't look at her. Wade leaned toward him and whispered something. My father's jaw clenched. He sat down. Judith waited for the silence to settle fully, then opened to the first page. "Now let me read the last will and testament of Helen Grace Whitfield." She didn't get far. She had barely finished the preamble. My mother's full legal name, the date of execution, the standard declaration of sound mind, when my father broke. He didn't shout. That would have been easier. Instead, he turned in his chair to face me directly, his eyes hard, his voice level. "You know what your problem is, Corinne." Uncle Frank straightened. Ruth set her pen down. "You've been a burden your whole life. Your mother spent everything on your medical bills, every dime. And what did you give back? Nothing." I didn't move. My hands lay flat on the table, swollen knuckles pressed against the wood. "You can't work. You can't live alone. You can't even walk without help some days." He shook his head. "Helen felt guilty about your disease. That's the only reason she kept you around. Guilt, not love." The words hit me one at a time, each one aimed precisely at the place that was already bleeding. Aunt Carol shot to her feet so fast her chair hit the wall behind her. "That is enough, Harold." Uncle Frank was shaking his head, murmuring, "I can't believe what I'm hearing." Sylvia put a hand on my father's arm. "Honey, calm down," she said gently, her eyes bright and alert. She wanted this. She wanted every word of it on the record. What she didn't know, what nobody in that room knew yet, was that Judith's paralegal had been recording since the moment the meeting began. Standard procedure for a contested estate proceeding in that state, entirely legal. I looked at Judith. She gave me the smallest nod, barely a movement, and I knew my mother was about to speak. Judith let the silence stretch, unhurried, letting every person in the room sit with what my father had just said. Then she spoke quietly, the way a surgeon speaks before the first cut. "Are you finished, Mr. Bragg?" He said nothing, his chest rising and falling. Sylvia was still gripping his arm. "Good," Judith said, resting both hands on the document, "because your wife had something to say about all of that." She turned to the first substantive page. The room was so quiet, I could hear Uncle Walter breathing from the far end of the table. Judith read aloud. "I, Helen Grace Whitfield, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all prior wills and codicils." She moved through the standard clauses: executor designation, revocation language, state compliance. I watched my father's face. He was still waiting. Then Judith reached the first bequest. "To my daughter, Corinne Marie Hale." My father sat forward. Sylvia stopped dabbing her eyes. "I leave the family residence located at 417 Burwood Lane, which has been held in the Helen G. Whitfield Revocable Living Trust since 2021. My father's mouth fell open. "What?" Judith continued without pausing.
The property was transferred into the trust on March 14, 2021. The trust names Corinne Marie Hale as sole beneficiary upon my passing. That's impossible, my father said, gripping the edge of the table. My name is on that deed. I signed it. Your name was never on the deed, Mr. Bragg. Judith looked up from the page, her glasses catching the light. The property was purchased with Helen's separate funds in 2014. It was always her separate property. The trust simply formalized that fact. The color left my father's face all at once, like someone had pulled a plug. Judith turned the page. And that's just the house. Shall I continue? She continued. The life insurance policy through Pacific Mutual, face value $2,100,000, beneficiary Corinne Marie Hale, designated 3 years earlier, confirmed by the insurer. My father turned to Wade. Wade shook his head. He was already writing. The investment portfolio, valued at approximately $4,200,000, held within the trust, sole beneficiary upon death, Corinne Marie Hale. Uncle Frank leaned back in his chair, eyes wide. The individual retirement accounts, current value approximately $1,800,000, designated beneficiary, Corinne Marie Hale. Ruth Delgado flipped through her own notes, looked up at Judith. Judith met her eyes and nodded. Ruth nodded back. The numbers were clean. The savings account containing approximately $850,000, originally a joint account. Helen had separated it into an individual account on June 12, 2022. The balance passed to Corinne Marie Hale. Judith paused, then turned one more page. To Carol Louise Bennett, my beloved sister, $500,000, with my gratitude for a lifetime of love. Carol pressed her hand to her mouth. She hadn't known. To the Lupus Research Alliance, $200,000, in honor of my daughter's strength. Judith set the page down, removed her glasses, and looked directly at my father. To Harold Bragg, my husband, $50,000, as a gesture of goodwill, and to fulfill my legal obligation to acknowledge his existence in this document. $50,000, out of everything. My father gripped the table with both hands, his knuckles white. Sylvia sat beside him, perfectly still, staring at the document like it was written in a language she didn't understand. Judith closed the page. Ms. Delgado can confirm all transfers, designations, and trust documents are in order and have been independently verified. Ruth spoke for the first time. Confirmed. My father was on his feet before Judith had even finished setting the document down. This is fraud. His voice bounced off the walls. She forged this. Helen would never... Wade grabbed his arm. Sit down, he said twice. Sit down right now. My father didn't sit. His hand pointed at the folder like it was a weapon. Wade turned to Judith, his voice controlled but strained. Can we verify the witnesses? Judge Patricia Sowell notarized it personally, Judith said, without blinking. I have her signed attestation. Would you like to call her? Wade didn't answer. He didn't need to. A sitting judge's notarization was a fortress, and he knew it. So did Cole. So did everyone in that room with a law degree. My father spun toward me. You put her up to this. Spit gathered at the corner of his mouth. You manipulated a dying woman. I looked at him, my father, his face red, his hands shaking, every mask finally gone. I spoke for the first time since the meeting began, my voice steadier than I expected. I don't know how. Mom did this 3 years ago, before she was even sick, before Sylvia moved in. The words hung in the air. I watched them land on every face around the table. Uncle Frank nodded slowly. Uncle Walter closed his eyes. Sylvia stood up, tears streaming, real or manufactured. I couldn't tell anymore. This family is tearing itself apart. Helen wouldn't want this. Aunt Carol didn't even look at her. Sit down, Sylvia. You didn't know Helen. I did. Sylvia froze, then sat. Wade leaned close to my father's ear. I was near enough to catch the whisper. We can't contest this, not with a judge's notarization and video evidence. My father looked at Wade the way a drowning man looks at a life raft floating out of reach. Video, he said. What video? Judith opened the laptop and positioned the screen to face the center of the table. Helen recorded a video statement to accompany the will, she said. She asked that it be played in full. She pressed play, and there she was. My mother, sitting in the living room at Burwood Lane, in the green velvet armchair, the same one my father had claimed as his own. Late afternoon light through the window. Her hair was still thick, her face still full. This was before the cancer, before the chemo hollowed her out. She was wearing the blue cardigan I'd given her for Christmas 3 years earlier. "If you're watching this," she said, "then I'm gone." Her voice was clear and calm, the voice I remembered from bedtime stories and doctors' waiting rooms, the voice that sat beside me during every flare, rubbing my hands until I could finally sleep. And I'm guessing Harold is sitting in that room right now, angry. I looked at my father. He flinched, just slightly, as if she'd tapped him on the shoulder from somewhere he couldn't see. "I want Corinne to know something." Mom looked straight into the camera. "You were never a burden. You are the best thing I ever did. Your lupus doesn't define you. Your heart does." Aunt Carol grabbed my hand under the table. "I put everything in your name because I trust you. Not because I don't love your father, but because I know what happens when grief meets greed." She paused, took a breath. "Harold, if you're listening, I hoped you'd prove me wrong. I really did." Uncle Frank wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Uncle Walter's head was bowed. Ruth had stopped writing entirely. My father stared at the screen, jaw locked, hands flat on the table, unmoving. Sylvia's eyes drifted toward the conference room door. Then my mother said, "There's one more thing I need to say about Sylvia." Her face on the screen didn't change. She didn't look angry. She didn't look bitter. She looked like a woman telling the truth because she knew she wouldn't get another chance. "Sylvia, I know you've been seeing Harold since before my diagnosis. I found the messages on his phone 2 months before I went to see Judith." The room stopped breathing. I turned to look at Sylvia. The tissue was frozen against her cheek, her eyes fixed on the screen. The performance was over. My father's head snapped toward her. "You told me she never—" "I don't say this out of bitterness," my mother continued, her voice cutting cleanly through the room. "I say it because Corinne deserves to know, and everyone in this room deserves to know, that the decisions I made were based on facts, not feelings." Uncle Frank's hands gripped his knees. Uncle Walter looked at my father with an expression I had never seen on his gentle face before. Disgust. "Harold chose Sylvia before I even started chemo," Mom went on. "I chose to protect my daughter." My chest ached, not from the lupus, but from the weight of understanding. My mother had known everything. She'd watched her husband fall for someone else while she was still healthy, still present, still making dinner and folding laundry in a house she knew she might one day lose. And she hadn't screamed. She hadn't begged. She had gone to a lawyer and quietly built a wall around me. "Corinne," Mom said, and she smiled then, small and sad and beautiful. "Live your life. Take care of your health. And remember, you don't owe anyone who chose to leave you." The screen went dark. Nobody spoke. Sylvia picked up her handbag, stood, walked to the door, opened it, and left. She didn't look at my father. She didn't look at anyone. He sat alone on his side of the table. No wife, no new wife. Just a man in a navy suit, staring at a closed laptop with 12 people watching him become exactly what my mother had said he would. Judith closed the laptop and put her glasses back on. Her voice was the same as it had been at the start, measured, professional, utterly unshakable. "The trust transfers effective immediately. Corinne Marie Hale is the sole owner of the Burwood Lane property." She turned a page. "Regarding the life insurance policy and investment accounts, I've already filed the necessary documentation with the respective institutions. Corinne's beneficiary status has been confirmed by each one." Wade was packing his briefcase, having said nothing since the video. Cole stared at his blank legal pad like it owed him an explanation. Judith looked at my father. "Mr. Bragg, you have 30 days to vacate the Burwood Lane property, as you are no longer a legal occupant." His voice came out small, smaller than I'd ever heard it. "She can't just throw me out of my own home." "It was never your home, Mr. Bragg." Judith's tone held no cruelty, only fact. "The deed has been in Helen's trust since 2021. You were a permitted occupant.
That permission ended with her passing and the terms of the trust. Wade stood, touched my father's shoulder. "Let's go." My father didn't move. "We'll need time to review," Wade said to Judith, the kind of thing lawyers say when there's nothing left to review. "Of course," Judith replied, "but the law is clear and the clock starts today." Wade guided my father to his feet. They walked toward the door, his steps slow and heavy, like the floor had gotten deeper beneath him. He didn't look at me. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't say anything at all. He walked out the same way he'd walked into my mother's hospital room the night she died. Late and alone. 3 days passed. I stayed at Carol's. I didn't call my father. I didn't check Facebook. I took my medication, kept my appointment with Dr. Greer, and read a novel my mother had left on her nightstand about a woman who sailed around the world alone. Mom had dog-eared page 212. On the 4th morning, my phone rang. My father. I almost let it go to voicemail, but I answered because I wanted this to be the last time. His voice was different. Not the commanding voice from the living room, not the cold voice from midnight. This was the voice of a man who had run out of people to stand behind. "Corinne, I'm your father. You can't just throw me out. You threw me out at midnight when I was sick, in the cold." I was angry. I wasn't thinking straight. "You told me to find somewhere else to die." Silence. I could hear him breathing. "Sylvia made me." "No." My voice didn't waver. "You're a grown man. You made your own choices." More silence, longer this time. I could picture him sitting in Mom's kitchen, at Mom's table, in Mom's house, with 30 days left on the clock. "I'm not doing this out of revenge, Dad." I needed him to hear that. "I'm doing this because Mom wanted me safe, and you showed me exactly why she was right." He started to say something. I didn't wait for it. "You have 30 days. Judith's firm will help you find housing if you need it. Goodbye, Dad." I ended the call and set the phone on the counter. My hand was trembling, not from the lupus this time, just from the ordinary pain of closing a door on someone who should have been holding it open for you. Carol was standing in the doorway. She didn't ask what he'd said. She just walked over and held me. 30 days later, I turned the key in my own front door. My father had left the week before, moved to Ohio to stay with his brother. He'd taken his clothes, his golf clubs, and a box of tools from the garage. He left everything else, the furniture, the dishes, my mother's things. He left her wind chimes on the porch. I don't know if that was kindness or simply forgetting. I chose to believe it was the last decent thing he did. The house smelled like dust and closed windows, and underneath all of it, her lavender hand cream. The wool throw still sat on the couch, coffee beans in the freezer, because she swore it kept them fresh. I walked through every room, the kitchen, the living room, the hallway where he'd stood that midnight with an empty suitcase, my old bedroom, then hers. I stopped in her doorway. The green velvet armchair was exactly where she'd always kept it, by the window, angled toward the garden. On the nightstand beside her bed sat something I hadn't expected. A leather-bound journal, my mother's handwriting on the first page. I opened it. Page after page, letters, all addressed to me, dated across 14 months, the entire length of her illness. Some were long, some just a few lines. She wrote about the weather, about a cardinal that visited the bird feeder every morning, about how she could hear me sleeping through the wall, and how it was the most comforting sound in the world. The last entry was dated 1 week before she died. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, but still unmistakably hers. "You're going to be okay, baby. I made sure of it." I sat on her bed, held the journal against my chest, and cried. Not from grief, not from anger, not even from relief. From the simple, overwhelming knowledge that I had been loved by someone who planned for a future she would never live to see. The wind chimes sang through the open window, and for the first time in months, I could breathe. Here's what happened to everyone after that room emptied. My father moved to Columbus, Ohio, staying with his older brother in a 2-bedroom apartment off the interstate. He had $50,000. After Wade's legal fees and Cole's consultation charges, $12,000 between the two of them, he had $38,000 left.
No house, no investments, no wife. Sylvia left the reading that day and never came back. Not to the house, not to my father's phone calls, not to anything. 2 weeks later, my father came home to Burwood Lane, still within his 30 days, and found her closet empty. Every piece of jewelry, every shoe, gone. She filed for separation that same week. He told Aunt Carol she'd changed her number. I learned later through Judith that Sylvia had been trying to petition for custody of her 2 children from an earlier marriage. Her entire case had depended on proving financial stability. Without my father's money, without my mother's money, she had nothing left to show the judge. The petition was denied. The rest of the family found out eventually. Not because I told anyone. I never posted a word, never made a call. Uncle Frank told one person, that person told 2 more, and within a month, the same relatives who had called to lecture me about being ungrateful were leaving voicemails I never returned. We didn't know the whole story, Corinne. We're so sorry. We should have listened. I didn't blame them, not really. My father always told a good story. But the truth was louder. It always is. It just takes longer to arrive. I didn't need the whole world to know what happened. The people in that room knew, and that was enough. Judith sent me a final letter a week after the 30 days were up. Short and professional, with one line added at the bottom in her own handwriting. Helen would be proud. I am too. The first thing I did with my mother's gift was make sure I could stay alive. I enrolled in comprehensive health insurance, the kind that covers rheumatology, lab work, prescriptions, and the emergency room visits that lupus sometimes demands at 2 a.m. I'd gone 5 weeks without any insurance at all, and those 5 weeks had cost me more fear than I know how to describe. Dr. Greer ran a full panel at my first appointment back. He looked at the results, then looked at me over his reading glasses. Your labs are better than they've been in 2 years. He set the chart down. Stress kills, Corinne. Peace heals. I started working again, part-time at first, 3 days a week at a community outreach center downtown, doing social work, the field I'd studied before lupus interrupted everything. My role was simple: helping women navigate financial abuse within family systems, helping them understand what they were legally entitled to, helping them find lawyers like Judith. There were still days I couldn't get out of bed. Lupus doesn't care about your plans. But now I had the resources to rest when I needed it, to see a specialist the moment a flare hit, to live without the terror of choosing between groceries and medication. Aunt Carol came by every Saturday, bringing containers of soup, neighborhood gossip, and the quiet, steady presence that reminded me I still had family worth the word. I did one more thing. I sat down with Judith and set up a trust of my own. Not because I needed to protect myself from anyone, but because my mother had taught me what preparation looks like, what love looks like when it thinks ahead. I hadn't just inherited money. I had inherited my mother's courage, and I intended to use it. 6 months later, a letter arrived, handwritten, postmarked Columbus, Ohio. I recognized the handwriting before I even opened it. Tight, slanted, the same hand that had signed my permission slips in elementary school. Corinne, I made mistakes. I know that now. I miss your mother. I miss you. Can we talk, Dad? I sat with that letter for a long time, on the porch, in Mom's chair, the wind chimes turning slow circles above my head. I didn't feel anger. That surprised me. I'd expected it, the way you expect thunder after lightning. It never came. What came instead was something quieter, a clear understanding that some doors need to stay closed, not out of hatred, but out of honesty. I went inside, sat at the kitchen table, and pulled out a piece of stationery my mother used to keep in the hallway drawer, cream paper with her initials embossed at the top. I wrote, "Dad, I don't hate you, but I can't trust you, and I won't pretend to just to make you feel better. If you're serious about changing, start with yourself, not with me. I wish you well, but my door isn't open right now. Maybe one day. Not today." I folded the letter, sealed the envelope, addressed it, and walked it to the mailbox. I didn't shut the door forever. I want to be clear about that. I never made some grand declaration about never speaking to my father again. That would be its own kind of cruelty, and I'd had enough cruelty for one lifetime. But I didn't leave the door open out of guilt, or loneliness, or because someone told me I should. If that door opens again, it will be because I'm ready, not because I've been pressured into it. I went back out to the porch. The wind chimes caught a breeze. I listened to them the way I used to listen to my mother humming in the kitchen. Not for the melody, just for the fact that it was there. I'm not telling you this story because I want sympathy. If that's what it sounded like, let me try again. I'm telling you because somewhere out there, someone is listening to this at 2 a.m, maybe through earbuds so nobody else can hear. And maybe that person just lost someone they loved. Or maybe they're being told they're a burden. Or maybe their own family is fighting over things that should be sacred. A house, a promise, a name on a piece of paper. If that's you, I want you to hear this. My mother taught me that love isn't just words. Love is preparation. It's sitting in a lawyer's office while you're still healthy, thinking ahead to what happens when you're not. It's putting someone's name on a trust they don't even know exists because you can feel the storm coming and you know they'll need shelter. If you have a sick child, a vulnerable parent, a family member who depends on you, please talk to a lawyer. Set up a trust. Write a will. Name your beneficiaries. Don't leave it to chance. Don't assume the people around you will do the right thing once you're gone. Some will, some won't. And by then, you won't be there to find out. And if you're the one being told you're not enough, that you're a burden, that your illness makes you less, that you should be grateful for scraps instead of standing up for what's rightfully yours, hear me clearly. You are enough. Your illness doesn't make you less. Needing help doesn't make you weak. Anyone who uses your vulnerability against you has already told you exactly who they are. Believe them. My mother believed in me from a leather chair in a lawyer's office 3 years before she died. She never told me. She just did it. That's the kind of love that outlives everything. It's spring now. I'm sitting on the front porch of 417 Burwood Lane. My porch. My house. The house my mother bought, protected, and gave to me. Not with a speech, but with a signature on a Tuesday afternoon nobody else knew about. There's a cup of tea cooling on the railing, chamomile, her favorite. I don't even like chamomile, but I buy it anyway. The smell is the closest I get to sitting beside her again. Her journal sits on the table next to me. I've read every page, some of them twice, some so many times the ink is starting to fade where my thumbs hold the paper. I keep it close, not because I need to read it again, but because the weight of it in my hands feels like her hand in mine. Lupus is still here. It will always be here. Last Tuesday was a bad day. My knees locked up, and I spent the morning on the kitchen floor waiting for the prednisone to work. But I have insurance now. I have a doctor I trust. I have a body that fights me, and a life that's finally worth the fight. In the garden, something catches my eye, along the back fence where the morning sun hits first. A row of tulips, red and yellow, tall and open. My mother planted them the spring before she died, 9 months before, already in treatment, already losing weight, already tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. But she knelt in the dirt with a trowel and planted bulbs she knew she would never live to see bloom. She planted them for me. That's what love looks like. I close the journal. I lean back in the chair. The wind chimes sing, and somewhere, I don't know where, I don't know how, I believe she knows I'm okay. So that's my story. It was never about the money. It's about a mother who loved her daughter enough to fight for her from beyond the grave. It's about a woman who saw the worst coming and built a shield out of paperwork and preparation, and the quiet, stubborn belief that her child deserved better. If you've ever been underestimated, discarded, or told that you don't matter, I hope this story reminded you of something simple. Someone sees you. Someone believes in you, even if they're not here anymore to say it out loud. And if they were anything like my mother, they already made sure you'd be okay. You just might not know it yet. If this story touched your heart, let me know in the comments. What was the moment that hit you the hardest? If you've ever had to set boundaries with family, type, "I stood my ground" below. Hit like if you believe every parent should protect their child's future, and check the description for more stories like this one. I'll see you in the next.